This story takes place 2 years after the events of the first film, set not long after the end of World War II. We are in Karelia, a region that once belonged to Finland, then fell under Nazi control. Atami Korpi's family has been murdered. By this time, Atami has become very wealthy from the gold he found, and he has left his homeland to return to Karelia. When he arrives, he finds his old house still standing, almost untouched, as if the war had never flattened the rest of the land. Inside, he discovers photos of his wife and 2 sons. Those images pull him into a deep silence, bringing back memories he has tried to bury. And that silence is where the revenge begins. This is Sisu, Road to Revenge. The story then shifts to a prison in Siberia, where a single inmate is being held. He is called out, and we learn his name, Yegor. A high-ranking officer, General Sergei, comes to see him. Sergei reminds Yegor of his past, of the time he entered Finland with Nazi forces, and how his unit burned villages to the ground. In one of those brutal raids, Yegor slaughtered a mother and her 2 young sons, even mutilating their bodies in a fit of rage. What he did not know then was that this family belonged to Atami, a Finnish soldier rumored to have killed hundreds on his own and turned into a living legend. Now that Atami has returned to this land, Sergei wants Yegor to hunt him down and finish him, believing that if they do not stop Atami, he will come for them and spill even more blood. Yegor eventually agrees to take on the mission. Meanwhile, Atami is busy stacking large logs he finds around his old home. He carefully selects the ones that are still solid, uses a pull tool and ropes to drag and lift them, then loads them onto his truck. The work is heavy and exhausting, but Atami is used to doing everything alone. When he is done gathering all the usable wood, he burns the broken pieces and decides it is time to leave. His plan is simple, to build himself a new house. With the memory of his family still pressing on his mind, he drives away from the area and starts a long journey home, roughly 120 miles. As he drives, he occasionally glances at the family photo tucked inside the truck's cabin. Before long, 2 officers stop his vehicle. Atami notices another truck pulling up behind them and immediately senses that this is not a normal inspection. One of the officers takes his identification and passes it to the man in the truck behind them, Yegor. Yegor looks over the logs in the back of Atami's truck, and knowing the legend about this man and his attachment to his old home, decides that everything should end there, with that house and that wood. The officers start to move in. One of them begins pouring alcohol into a bottle to make a Molotov cocktail, while another approaches from behind with a gun drawn. Before their plan can unfold, Atami suddenly swings open his door and shoots the closest officer. He then slams the truck into reverse, crashing into the second officer who is trying to fire from behind. He tries to escape, but one of the men manages to climb into the passenger seat. Atami fights back and quickly takes him down, stopping the ambush before it can truly begin. Meanwhile, Yegor sends a large military truck packed with soldiers to hunt Atami down. One of the soldiers in Atami's truck eventually regains consciousness, and Atami notices he has a gun with no bullets loaded. Calmly, Atami orders him to reload it, then takes the weapon for himself while keeping the truck speeding forward. Behind him, Yegor's convoy tightens the distance. When Atami reaches an open stretch of road, he stops and opens the door. The soldier tries to escape, but Yegor's men quickly catch up and shoot him. While their attention is on the fallen soldier, Atami steps out and strikes back. One by one, he eliminates the soldiers with ruthless precision. Once the unit is wiped out, Atami takes aim at Yegor's vehicle. Yegor reaches for a gun handed to him, but before his soldier can pass it over, Atami shoots the man instead. Since Yegor is now unarmed, Atami chooses not to finish him yet. Instead, he shoots out his tires, then gets back in his truck and continues driving. At this point, Atami still has no idea that Yegor is the man responsible for murdering his family. Furious and humiliated, Yegor calls for reinforcements over the radio. A fast strike unit of motorcycle soldiers is sent after Atami. Once Yegor replaces his damaged tire, he follows. Atami tries to alternate his route and shake off pursuit, but Yegor anticipates the move and orders the motor unit to surround him. Within moments, armored bikers close in behind the truck. Atami fires at them, but their thick metal helmets take the impact. They return fire and a round hits Atami, forcing his truck off the road and into dense bushes. Even wounded, he manages to steer back onto the main path. The bikers push closer. One jumps onto the back of the truck and launches an attack, but Atami dodges. The soldier grabs the dangling rope on the truck to try again, but Atami swerves sharply. The biker loses balance and is run over by Yegor's vehicle behind him. Another attacker aims his weapon, but Atami drives recklessly enough to send the man crashing to his death. One last soldier climbs onto the roof of the cabin and tries to pull Atami out, but Atami fights back. The man slips and is left hanging by the same rope. Without hesitation, Atami feeds the loose end into the engine, tightening the rope until the soldier is strangled. The entire motorcycle squad is gone. Feeling cornered, Yegor orders Atami's wooden cargo to be burned. Atami responds in the most brutal way possible. He straps a stick of dynamite to the body of one soldier, still stuck on the truck, then throws the corpse directly toward Yegor's vehicle. Yegor barely escapes before a massive explosion destroys it completely. Atami drives the truck deep into the forest, trying to save what remains of his timber. He covers the wood with leaves to smother the flames and buy himself a little more time. But Yegor is becoming desperate and furious. He calls in the deadliest air support he can get, determined to wipe Atami off the map. Atami pauses to check the condition of his cargo. Some of the wood is burned, but much of it is still usable. He refills the radiator, knowing there is still a long journey ahead, then feeds his loyal dog before taking a moment to breathe. It is then he notices how deep the bullet wound on his cheek really is. Even with the pain, he keeps going. Suddenly, a shadow passes overhead. Aircraft sweep low above the trees. Atami immediately knows who sent them. Without hesitation, he grabs his dog, places him in the truck, and speeds away before the planes can circle back. He accelerates hard, but one of the enemy planes dives and opens fire. Atami swerves sharply to avoid the bullets and spots a small house with a garage nearby. He pulls into the garage, using it as temporary cover, though he knows it will not last long. Just ahead lies a dense forest. He notices a heavy wooden plank and places it over the truck bed as added protection. Above him, the enemy plane makes another tight turn and fires a missile. The garage explodes in moments, but Atami has already escaped. The planes continue firing, but the thick plank absorbs much of the damage. Atami drives straight into the trees. The dense canopy makes it hard for the pilots to track him, and for a moment, he gains distance. One of the planes eventually spots him again and attempts another attack run. But Atami stops suddenly. The plane overshoots, crashes, and erupts into flames. With the air quiet again, he keeps moving until he reaches open land. He stops briefly, checking his surroundings for the second aircraft. As he continues along the edge of the field, the last plane finally spots him and makes one final attack run. The aircraft flies low, firing again, but its ammunition is gone. Frustrated, the pilot attempts a suicide strike. He locks in his path, straps down his harness, and jumps out with a parachute. Atami reacts fast. He releases the straps holding the logs, brakes hard, the jet collides with the wood, loses control, and explodes violently. The pilot lands not far away and begins shooting again. Exhausted and fed up, Atami walks toward him. The pilot suddenly laughs when he looks past him. A massive bomber is heading straight toward them. Atami rushes back, quickly reloads all the logs, slams the truck bed shut, and floors the accelerator. The pilot watches, convinced this is the end. The bomber releases its payload, and the blast shakes the entire field. The explosion nearly takes out the pilot himself. Atami swerves, avoids the chain of blasts, and heads straight toward the water. Beneath the surface of the water, Atami struggles to breathe. His first instinct is to push his dog towards safety. Then he forces himself to swim out. Below him, the truck sinks along with every piece of timber he has fought so hard to protect. He dives again and cuts the ropes holding the logs together. One by one, they shoot upward toward the surface. But while doing it, his strength finally gives out, and he loses consciousness underwater. The floating logs eventually lift his body up. His dog searches frantically until one of the rising logs pushes Atami toward the surface, keeping him from drowning. Slowly, he regains consciousness. He is alive, and so are his dog and every single log he saved. As the sun begins to set, Yegor arrives at the site by boat. He wants confirmation, and his men report that the truck has sunk, but there is no body. They all know what that means. Atami survived, and he is still out there. Yegor is frustrated, but he is certain the chase is far from over. Later that night, Atami builds a makeshift raft out of his logs and crosses the water with his dog until he reaches land again. Once he steps ashore, he spots an old abandoned tank sitting near the coastline. Inside, he finds weapons and ammunition. Slowly and methodically, he begins assembling everything, preparing for whatever comes next. The Soviet and Finnish border is not far. Yegor arrives first and waits, because there is only one path forward. It is only a matter of time before Atami reaches it. Soon, the sound of heavy machinery grows louder. Atami appears, riding the tank with his salvaged logs strapped to the top. Yegor's forces immediately brace for battle. Atami sits behind the controls and drives forward as the enemy opens fire. He ignites a fuel trail behind him, creating a burning path cutting through the ground. With full speed and sheer force, he pushes ahead. Hidden charges planted earlier detonate, creating a massive blast that launches the tank forward. It crashes past the border and lands on the Finnish side. But before he can continue, the tank's tracks snap, trapping him inside. Yegor watches with satisfaction as Atami, exhausted and bleeding, tries to stay conscious. Atami pulls out a knife and separates the blade from its wooden handle. Before doing anything else, he makes sure his dog escapes the tank and crosses safely into Finland. Atami crawls out next, but Yegor grabs him before he can get away. Just as Yegor is about to end him, Sergei arrives with his own men. They want Atami alive, so Yegor hands him over. Before leaving, Yegor reminds him that nothing feels as good as being home, then kicks him hard enough to knock him unconscious. As night falls, Atami is loaded onto a train heading toward Russia. He is hung upside down and beaten repeatedly throughout the journey. Blood drips steadily onto the metal floor beneath him. Yegor eventually approaches, enjoying every second of Atami's suffering. He begins speaking about his past crimes, bragging about the countless innocent people he has killed. He recalls a memory that stands out from all the others. During one of his raids, a young boy stabbed him while trying to protect his family. The wound nearly blinded him. Only later did he realize that the weapon the boy used came from Atami's home. That brave boy, the one he never forgot, was Atami's son. Yegor then reveals how rage took over that day and how he slaughtered the boy, his sibling, and their mother, leaving their bodies to be devoured by his dogs. He should never have said any of it, because now the anger inside Atami is fully awake again. Yegor gets close, proud and unafraid, and reminds him that the soldiers feared him, but he never did. Then he promises that Atami will suffer for days and die in their prison. Yegor walks away. Hanging there, bruised and bloodied, Atami quietly prepares himself. He hooks his legs upward, gathers all his strength, and snaps the rope holding him. His body crashes to the floor. The noise draws the guards. They casually decide who should finish the job. What they do not know is that earlier Atami hid the metal blade of his knife inside his own wound. The first guard steps inside, and Atami attacks with explosive force. The second enters to investigate. He panics and jumps off the moving train, rather than face him. Atami discards the weapons the guards dropped and begins preparing for what comes next. Meanwhile, in another carriage, Yegor is forced to sit through a formal banquet with Sergei and several generals. He hates every second of it. He demands his payment, but Sergei makes him stay and drink. The more they drink, the more restless and irritated Yegor becomes. At the same time, Atami silently makes his way through the train. His logs are stored in the next carriage. He moves carefully. One soldier is asleep. Another wakes and decides to step outside. Before the man can raise an alarm, Atami throws his axe, killing him instantly. Seconds later, another soldier spots him. Atami takes him out without hesitation. Most of the remaining troops are still fast asleep. Atami moves forward carefully, trying not to make a sound. But suddenly, a soldier drops a bottle of alcohol. The loud crash echoes through the carriage, and chaos begins. Some soldiers start waking up, confused by the sound. Realizing he has seconds before the situation explodes, Atami crawls under a storage rack to hide. Broken glass scrapes his skin as he moves, and at one point, his hand even gets caught in a mousetrap. Every noise draws more attention, and more soldiers begin to wake up. Seeing that silence is no longer an option, Atami grabs his axe and moves forward. He climbs out from his hiding spot, shuts the compartment behind him, and checks the next carriage. Many of the officers here are still awake, so he climbs onto the roof and moves ahead. But luck runs out. A metal pipe strikes him, and he falls straight into a carriage full of armed soldiers. They rush him all at once, but Atami uses the momentum of his fall to turn the situation around, taking them down one by one. He grabs a machine gun and opens fire without hesitation. The sound of gunfire shakes the entire train and reaches Yegor's compartment. Yegor instantly knows who is responsible. Once the carriage is cleared, Atami steps out, ready to face Yegor. But Yegor chooses to run. Atami notices something large beneath a tarp. When he pulls it away, he discovers a missile. Meanwhile, Yegor storms into a private cabin where Sergei and the generals are gathered. Without warning, he kills everyone in the room. When Sergei tries to bargain with money, Yegor takes it, shoots him, and sits down, drinking calmly. Back on the train, another group of soldiers break down the door, only to discover the train has stopped. Atami is gone, riding away with the missile. Yegor sees the piles of money beside him and smiles, convinced he has won. But the room suddenly shakes. A missile is flying toward the train. Yegor realizes something has gone very wrong. Atami appears, riding the missile like a final act of vengeance. He stops it at the train and launches himself straight at Yegor. The two engage in a brutal fight. Yegor gains the upper hand, beating Atami mercilessly and taking the money for himself. But Atami refuses to stay down. Worn and desperate, he grabs a fork and drives it into Yegor's leg. Yegor fights back, tries to choke him, but Atami manages to reverse the struggle again. Enraged, Yegor grabs a metal rod and beats him repeatedly. Blood covers Atami, and Yegor mocks him, convinced the revenge failed. He shoves Atami out of the carriage. The missile is still attached to the train. Atami suddenly realizes what he needs to do. Yegor steps outside and taunts him, asking if he has any last words. Instead of speaking, Atami spits out a small metal screw. The same screw that held the missile in place. Now loose, the missile shoots forward. At the last moment, it hangs suspended in the air, inches from Yegor's face. He breathes out in relief, thinking fate just spared him. Then the missile reactivates, and it fires. From a distance, Atami watches the flames rise into the sky. He knows exactly what that means. Yegor's brutal pursuit has ended, and after everything he has endured, there is finally a sense of justice. It is not joy, just quiet satisfaction and relief. 2 days later, near the Finnish border, a group of guards rest at a small station. The sound of slow, heavy footsteps catches their attention. They raise their weapons, ready for anything. What they see is a man covered in dirt, blood, and exhaustion, walking toward them while dragging the same stack of logs he refused to abandon. It is Atami Korpi. They stop him and ask for his identification. When they read his name, they pause. The legends they grew up hearing are standing right in front of them. Without hesitation, the guards lower their weapons and give him a respectful salute. Days pass, and Atami begins rebuilding a home near the border, accompanied only by his loyal dog. Using the wood he fought so hard to protect, he lays the foundation of a new life. His wounds slowly heal, and his strength returns. While he works, his dog suddenly barks. Atami prepares himself, expecting another threat. But instead, a small group of villagers approaches. At first, he assumes they want something from him. Instead, they gently tell him that no one builds something this large alone, and they are there to help. That simple offer hits him harder than any bullet or blow. For the first time in a very long time, someone reaches out to help him instead of hurt him. His eyes fill with tears he cannot hide. The villagers do not ask questions. They do not expect anything in return. They simply join him, working side by side. Together, they raise the walls of his new home. With every lifted beam and every placed log, Atami begins reclaiming something far more precious than wood, gold, or vengeance. He begins reclaiming his humanity. And finally, after everything he lost and everything he survived, Atami stands surrounded by people who choose kindness. His house rises strong, and so does he. So the moral of the story is never mess with a quiet guy who loves wood more than social interaction, or you'll end up airborne, exploded, or accidentally eaten by your own bad decisions.